Admiral Zixithara pressed her four-fingered hand against the cold metal of the command deck railing. Through the massive viewing screen, she watched another Allied ship die. The sleek Velterran cruiser twisted like a wounded animal as black tendrils wrapped around its hull. Within moments, the once proud vessel became part of the enemy swarm. "That's the 15th ship we've lost in the last hour," reported her tactical officer, his blue scales flickering with stress patterns. "The Void Swarm is adapting faster than our weapons can adjust." Zixithara's long neck swayed as she turned to face the holographic battle display. Red dots marked the positions of the enemy bioships. They moved like living things because they were living things. The Void Swarm didn't build their vessels. They grew them. And now those horrible creatures were eating their way through the combined fleet of 12 different species. The battle had been raging for 6 standard hours in the Kepler Nebula. This was supposed to be humanity's final stand against the most dangerous threat the galaxy had ever faced. Every major civilization had sent their best ships and their finest warriors. The Celestial Federation brought their energy shield technology. The Korthak Empire contributed their quantum torpedoes. The Wise Ethereal Collective offered their mind-link coordination systems. None of it mattered. "Admiral, the Korthak flagship is requesting permission to retreat," the communications officer announced. "Their quantum torpedoes are having no effect. The swarm ships are absorbing the energy and converting it into more biomass." Zixithara closed her large dark eyes. The Korthak were among the most aggressive warriors in the galaxy. If they wanted to retreat, the situation was even worse than she thought. "Tell them to hold position," she ordered. "If we break formation now, the swarm will overwhelm us completely." But she knew they were already overwhelmed. The Void Swarm had appeared 6 months ago at the edge of the galaxy. At first they seemed like any other hostile alien species. The Galactic Council had faced threats before. They had advanced weapons, powerful shields, and thousands of years of experience in space warfare. The swarm was different. They didn't use technology the way other species did. Their ships were alive, constantly changing and evolving. When the Council's energy weapons hit them, they adapted their bioarmor to resist. When missiles struck them, they absorbed the explosions and used the energy to grow larger. Worst of all, they were hungry. The swarm didn't want territory or resources in the traditional sense. They wanted to consume everything. They ate planets, stars, and entire solar systems. They turned matter into more of themselves, spreading like a disease across the galaxy. "Admiral," the sensor operator's voice cracked with panic. 3 more swarm dreadnoughts are approaching from the nebula's edge. They're each over 30 kilometers long. Zixithara looked at the tactical display. The new enemy ships were massive, even by swarm standards. Their biohulls pulsed with a sickly green light, and she could see smaller attack forms swarming around them like insects around a corpse. "All ships, concentrate fire on the lead dreadnought," she commanded. Maximum power to weapons. The combined fleet opened fire. Brilliant beams of energy lanced through space. Quantum torpedoes streaked toward their target like angry stars. For a moment, the alien biohull glowed white-hot under the assault. Then the light faded. The swarm dreadnought's surface rippled and changed. Where the energy beams had struck, new armor plates had grown. The quantum torpedo impacts had been absorbed completely, adding to the creature's mass. "It's not working," whispered the tactical officer. "Nothing we have can hurt them." Around the bridge, the crew members of different species exchanged worried glances. The Velterran scales shifted to pale colors of fear. The insectoid Chitauri clicked their mandibles nervously. Even the usually calm ethereals showed signs of distress in their telepathic auras. Zixithara had commanded fleets for over 50 years. She had fought pirates, rebels, and hostile aliens. She had never faced an enemy that seemed truly unstoppable. Until now. "Admiral, we're receiving a priority message from the Council homeworld," the communications officer reported. "They want a status update." "Tell them we're holding the line," Zixithara replied automatically. But they weren't holding anything. They were dying slowly, ship by ship, while the enemy grew stronger with each victory. The swarm had a horrifying intelligence behind their attacks. They didn't just consume randomly. They studied their enemies, learned their weaknesses, and adapted accordingly. The bioships shared information instantly through some kind of organic network. When one swarm creature learned how to resist a weapon, they all learned. "Long-range sensors are detecting movement at the edge of the system," the sensor operator announced. "Unknown contact approaching at high speed." Zixithara frowned. "Identify it." "Is it one of our ships?" Negative, Admiral. The design doesn't match any known vessel in our database. It's primitive looking. Small too. Maybe 2 kilometers in length. 2 kilometers? The tactical officer sounded shocked. That's smaller than our escort frigates. What kind of civilization builds warships that tiny? Unknown contact is broadcasting on standard frequencies, the communications officer reported. They're requesting permission to join the battle. Put it through. The main screen flickered and a strange alien face appeared. At least Zixthera assumed it was alien. The creature had only 2 eyes, positioned on the front of its head instead of the sides. Its skin was a pale pink color and it had no visible scales, feathers, or natural armor. Strangest of all, it seemed to have hair growing from the top of its head. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth System ship Indomitable," the creature said in heavily accented Galactic Standard. "We detected your battle and came to assist." United Earth Systems? Zixthera had never heard of them. "What species are you?" "Human," Captain Chen replied. "We're from a planet called Earth, in the Outer Rim territories." The Admiral quickly accessed the galactic database. There was a minimal entry for Earth, a small primitive world that had only achieved faster-than-light travel 50 years ago. Their technology was classified as barely spacefaring. They used fusion reactors instead of zero-point energy. They still employed kinetic weapons and chemical explosives. "Captain Chen," Zixthera said carefully, "this is a very dangerous situation. The enemy has destroyed half our fleet, and we have the most advanced weapons in the galaxy. I don't think there's anything you can do to help." The human's face showed an expression that Zixthera couldn't interpret. The lips curved upward slightly, showing white dental structures. "With respect, Admiral, you haven't seen what humans can do yet." Before Zixthera could respond, her sensor operator called out an alarm. "Admiral, the swarm ships are changing their formation. They're pulling back." On the tactical display, the bioships that had been advancing aggressively were now clustering together defensively. For the first time since the battle began, the Void Swarm seemed uncertain. "They've never encountered humans before," Captain Chen explained. "Their adaptation advantage doesn't work against the unknown." The small human ship moved toward the massive swarm formation. Compared to the 30-kilometer bio-dreadnoughts, it looked like a tiny insect approaching sleeping giants. But the giants were no longer sleeping. They were afraid. Captain Sarah Chen studied the massive alien fleet through her ship's view screen. She had seen the database files about the Galactic Council species. Their ships were beautiful, sleek vessels that looked more like works of art than instruments of war. Energy fields glowed around their hulls like protective auras. Their weapons fired beams of pure light that could vaporize asteroids. Right now, those magnificent ships were losing badly, ma'am. "We're getting multiple transmissions from the alien fleet," reported Lieutenant Martinez from the communications station. "They're asking about our weapon systems and tactical capabilities." Sarah almost smiled. "Tell them we'll demonstrate our capabilities shortly." "How long until we reach weapons range?" 30 seconds, Captain," answered her tactical officer, Commander Brooks. "The swarm ships are definitely reacting to our presence. They're not advancing anymore." "Good. They should be nervous." Sarah turned to address her bridge crew. "Listen up, everyone. These aliens have been fighting this enemy for hours with no success. Their weapons are more advanced than ours. Their ships are bigger and stronger, but they're thinking like civilized beings." She paused, looking each crew member in the eye. "We're not civilized. We're human, and we're about to show this galaxy what that means." The Indomitable was not an impressive ship by galactic standards. At 2 kilometers long, it was smaller than most civilian transports. Its hull was gray metal instead of gleaming energy-resistant alloys. Its weapons looked crude and bulky compared to the elegant beam projectors of the Council ships, but Sarah knew something the aliens didn't understand. Sometimes crude and bulky was exactly what you needed. "Captain, the alien admiral is trying to contact us again," Martinez reported. "Put her through." The strange reptilian face of Admiral Zixthera appeared on the screen. Her large eyes showed concern and confusion. "Captain Chen, our sensors indicate that your ship is armed with kinetic weapons and explosive devices. These are primitive technologies that will have no effect on swarm bioarmor." "Admiral, with respect, your advanced technologies aren't working either," Sarah replied. "Sometimes you need to try a different approach. But your weapons are thousands of years out of date. You're using projectile launchers and chemical explosives." Sarah's grin was not pleasant. Yes, we are. And the swarm has never seen anything like them. On the tactical display, the bioships continued their defensive clustering. The massive creatures that had been fearlessly absorbing energy weapons and quantum torpedoes were now acting cautious. Their organic hulls pulsed with different colors, and smaller attack forms swirled around them in protective patterns. They're trying to analyze us, Commander Brooks observed. But their sensors can't figure out how our weapons work. That's because they've evolved to counter energy-based attacks, Sarah explained. Their bioarmor adapts to beam weapons and energy torpedoes, but they've never had to deal with a tungsten slug moving at 30% of light speed. She opened a channel to the entire human crew. All hands, this is the captain. We're about to engage an enemy that has defeated the combined fleets of 12 galactic civilizations. They're bigger than us, they're stronger than us, and they think they're smarter than us. They're probably right about the first two. Nervous laughter echoed through the bridge, but they made one mistake. They assumed that everyone in the galaxy fights the same way. They're about to learn that humans don't fight fair, we don't fight clean, and we never know when to quit. Today we're going to teach the galaxy what human warfare looks like. The Indomitable crossed into weapons range. The swarm bioships immediately opened fire. Energy beams and living projectiles streaked toward the human vessel. But Sarah had expected this. Evasive maneuvers, she ordered. Pattern Delta 7. The human ship began to move in ways that confused both the swarm and the watching council fleet. Instead of the graceful, predictable flight patterns used by galactic civilizations, the Indomitable jinked and rolled like a drunk fighter pilot. It accelerated randomly, changed direction without warning, and generally flew like it was piloted by someone having a nervous breakdown. The humans are flying erratically, observed Admiral Zixathera's tactical officer. Their movement patterns make no sense. But they made perfect sense to Sarah. Human pilots had learned to fly unpredictably because human enemies were also unpredictable. When you spent thousands of years fighting other humans, you learned that random movement was the best defense. The swarm's targeting systems evolved to track the orderly movements of galactic warfare. Couldn't get a lock on the chaotically moving human ship. Weapons range achieved, reported Commander Brooks. Railguns are charged and ready. Fire everything, Sarah ordered. The Indomitable's first salvo was nothing like the elegant energy beams of the Council fleet. 8 massive railguns fired simultaneously, launching tungsten penetrator rods at incredible velocity. The projectiles had no energy signature for the swarm to absorb. They were simply mass-moving very, very fast. The tungsten rods punched through the bioarmor of a swarm cruiser like bullets through paper. The creature's hull convulsed as the kinetic impacts shattered its internal structure. Green fluid sprayed into space as the bioship writhed in what could only be described as agony. Direct hits, Brooks reported with satisfaction. The target is severely damaged, but Sarah wasn't finished. Launch nuclear torpedoes. Full spread. Ma'am, the Council fleet is requesting that we cease fire, Martinez said urgently. They're saying our weapons are too dangerous. Too dangerous for who? Sarah asked. The enemy? The nuclear torpedoes streaked toward the swarm formation. Unlike the quantum weapons used by galactic civilizations, these were crude fusion bombs wrapped in tungsten casings. When they detonated, they released not just energy but chaos. The swarm bioships tried to absorb the nuclear explosions as they had absorbed the Council's weapons. But fusion bombs didn't just release organized energy. They released radiation, electromagnetic pulses, and raw thermal shock. The bioarmor that had easily adapted to beam weapons couldn't process the chaotic nature of nuclear detonations. 3 swarm vessels began to dissolve as their biological systems failed. Their hulls bubbled and melted like living tissue exposed to acid. Smaller attack forms broke away from the dying ships, fleeing in panic. Impossible, whispered Admiral Zixathera as she watched the display. No one has been able to damage them like that. But the most devastating weapon was yet to come. Sarah activated her ship's cyber warfare suite. Deploy viral packages, she ordered. Target their bio-network. While the Council races had developed sophisticated logical computer systems, humans had weaponized information itself. The viral programs launched by the Indomitable weren't designed to infiltrate elegant alien networks. They were designed to attack biological neural systems with pure chaotic data. The effect on the swarm was immediate and terrifying. The bioships began firing on each other as their shared consciousness fractured. Massive dreadnoughts that had shrugged off the Council's heaviest weapons started attacking their own escorts. The organic network that had made them so efficient was now turning them against themselves. "My God," breathed Commander Brooks. "They're destroying each other." Sarah watched the chaos with grim satisfaction. That's what happens when you try to evolve an answer to human warfare. We don't just fight our enemies, we drive them insane. The watching Council fleet remained frozen in shock as a single human warship accomplished what their combined might could not. But Sarah wasn't done yet. "Prepare boarding pods," she ordered. "We're going aboard, ma'am." Brooks looked confused. "Our weapons are working. Why would we board their ships?" Sarah's smile was cold and predatory. "Because sometimes you need to look your enemy in the eye when you kill them." Gunnery Sergeant Maria Rodriguez checked her rifle one more time before stepping into the boarding pod. Around her, 11 other Marines performed their own pre-combat rituals. Some muttered prayers. Others simply stared at their weapons with the quiet focus of professional killers. "Listen up, Marines," Rodriguez announced. "We're about to board an alien bioship that's 30 kilometers long and filled with hostile life forms. The good news is that our intel suggests they've never fought humans in close combat before." Private Johnson, barely 18 years old, raised his hand nervously. "Sergeant, what's the bad news?" Rodriguez grinned, showing teeth that had been replaced with titanium after her last combat deployment. "The bad news is that we've never fought them either. But that's what makes it fun." Through the pod's small window, Rodriguez could see their target. The swarm bioship looked like a massive diseased whale floating in space. Its hull pulsed with veins of sickly light, and she could see weapon ports that looked more like infected wounds than gun emplacements. "Boarding pods away," announced Captain Chen's voice over the radio. "Godspeed, Marines." The pod launched from the Indomitable with a violent kick that pressed Rodriguez against her restraints. Through the Council fleet's communication channels, she could hear the alien admirals arguing about human tactics. "This is madness," one of them was saying. "No civilized species engages in hand-to-hand combat anymore. It's barbaric." "Yeah, well," Rodriguez muttered to herself. "We're not civilized." The pod smashed into the bioship's hull with bone-rattling force. Immediately, the hull began to seal around the impact point like living skin trying to heal a wound. But the Marines had expected this. "Thermite charges now," Rodriguez ordered. The Marines slapped their breach charges against the sealing bioarmor. The thermite burned at over 2,000 degrees, hot enough to melt through steel. The alien biomaterial had no defense against simple chemical fire. The hull dissolved into bubbling slag, and the Marines dropped through the hole into the ship's interior. Rodriguez landed in what looked like the inside of a giant stomach. The walls pulsed with organic rhythm, and strange fluids dripped from the ceiling. Bioluminescent patches provided sickly green light that cast twisted shadows everywhere. "Jesus Christ," whispered Corporal Kim. "This place smells like death." "Stay focused," Rodriguez ordered. "Remember, we're looking for the central nervous system nodes. Intelligence says they'll look like oversized brains connected to the ship's structure." The Marines moved through the organic corridors in tactical formation. Their boots splashed through pools of alien fluid, and the walls seemed to react to their presence. Openings that looked like sphincters dilated and contracted as they passed. "Contact front," shouted Private Martinez. A swarm warrior dropped from the ceiling like a nightmare spider. It was 3 meters tall with 6 limbs that ended in razor-sharp claws. Its head was mostly mouth, filled with rows of needle teeth. Acid dripped from its mandibles. The creature had evolved to fight energy weapons and psychic attacks. It had armor that could deflect particle beams and mental shields that blocked telepathic assault. It had never faced a 12-gauge shotgun loaded with depleted uranium. Slugs Rodriguez fired 3 times, and the alien warrior came apart like a rotten fruit. Blue ichor splattered the walls as the creature's carapace shattered under the impact of the heavy rounds. "Holy shit," breathed Johnson. "It just exploded." "That's what happens when you bring evolution to a gunfight," Rodriguez said grimly. "Keep moving." More swarm warriors appeared as they penetrated deeper into the ship. Some dropped from above, others crawled out of wall sphincters, and a few seemed to grow directly from the floor. They were all different, each one adapted for a specific type of combat. None of them had adapted for human weapons. The Marines used every tool in their arsenal. Assault rifles firing explosive rounds tore through bioarmor that had resisted particle cannons. Grenade launchers sent fragmentation charges into groups of warriors, shredding them with metal shrapnel. When the aliens tried to close to melee range, the Marines drew monomolecular combat knives and showed them why humans had spent millions of years perfecting the art of killing up close. "Sergeant, I'm reading massive neural activity ahead," reported Corporal Kim, checking her scanner. "Whatever controls this ship, it's in that direction." Rodriguez looked at her Marines. They were covered in alien blood and breathing hard, but their eyes still burned with combat fury. "You heard the lady. Let's go cut the head off this snake." They found the control center in what looked like a massive organic cathedral. The ceiling stretched up into darkness, supported by columns that looked like giant bones. In the center of the space, a brain the size of a small building pulsed with electrical activity. Thick cables connected it to every surface, carrying data and commands throughout the ship. "That's gotta be it," Rodriguez said, the central nervous system node, but they weren't alone. Dozens of swarm warriors surrounded the brain, protecting it. These were different from the ones they'd fought before. Larger, more heavily armored, with additional limbs and enhanced sensory organs. "Elite guards," observed Kim. "They've adapted specifically to protect this thing." Rodriguez smiled coldly. "Good, I was getting bored. The final battle was brutal even by human standards. The swarm elites were faster and stronger than the warriors they'd fought before. Their claws could punch through Marine armor, and their acid spit could melt metal. But the Marines had something the aliens couldn't understand or counter: pure, focused hatred. They fought like demons, emptying magazine after magazine into the swarm of defenders. When their ammunition ran low, they switched to grenades. When the grenades were gone, they drew their knives. Private Johnson died first, torn apart by 3 warriors while protecting Corporal Kim's flank. Martinez went next, dissolved by acid while trying to plant explosives on the brain itself. But for every Marine that fell, they killed dozens of aliens. "Kim," Rodriguez shouted over the gunfire. "Can you reach the brain?" The corporal was pinned behind one of the bone columns, blood streaming from a gash on her forehead. "Maybe, but I need covering fire." "You got it." Rodriguez stood up from her own cover and opened fire with everything she had. Her assault rifle chattered, sending explosive rounds into the mass of alien defenders. "Go, go, go!" Kim sprinted toward the brain, carrying a satchel of thermite charges. A swarm elite intercepted her, its claws reaching for her throat. She ducked under the swipe and drove her combat knife up through the creature's head, the monomolecular blade slicing through bone and brain tissue like butter. She reached the brain and began placing charges. The massive organ pulsed faster as it somehow sensed the danger. More warriors rushed toward her, but Rodriguez and the remaining Marines poured fire into them, creating a wall of death around their comrade. "Charges set," Kim shouted. 30 seconds. Everyone out," Rodriguez ordered. "Move, move, move." The surviving Marines ran for their lives through the organic corridors. Behind them they could hear the swarm warriors following, their claws scratching against the biometal floors. The ship itself seemed to be convulsing as if it knew what was about to happen. They reached the breach point just as the thermite charges detonated. The explosion tore through the ship's central nervous system, sending shockwaves through every connected system. The bioship's movements became erratic, and the Marines could hear inhuman screaming echoing through the walls. "Indomitable, this is Rodriguez," she shouted into her radio. "Get us out of here, now!" The rescue pod locked onto their position and extracted them just as the bioship began to tear itself apart. From the safety of the Indomitable's hangar bay, Rodriguez watched through the window as the massive alien vessel writhed in its death throes. 7 Marines down, she reported to Captain Chen. "But the target is neutralized." Chen nodded grimly. "Well done, Sergeant. How do you feel about doing it again? We've got 11 more bioships to take care of." Rodriguez looked at her surviving Marines. They were wounded, exhausted, and covered in alien blood, but they were also grinning with the fierce joy of warriors who had just proven themselves against impossible odds. "Ma'am," she said, "we're just getting started." Admiral Zix Thera watched in horrified fascination as the human warship rammed directly into a swarm dreadnought. The impact sent shockwaves through both vessels, and she could see sections of the human ship's hull breaking away like scattered debris. "They're insane," whispered her tactical officer. "Their ship is only 2 kilometers long. That bioship is 30 kilometers. It's suicide, but the humans weren't dying. They were winning." The Indomitable's armored prow had punched deep into the bioship's hull, tearing through layers of organic armor that had deflected the Council's most powerful weapons. Explosions rippled along both ships as the human vessel's self-destruct charges detonated, sending waves of destruction through the alien creature's internal structure. "Ma'am, we're receiving a transmission from Captain Chen," reported the communications officer. "Put it through." Captain Chen appeared on the screen, and Zixathera was shocked by what she saw. The human's face was streaked with blood from a head wound, and smoke drifted behind her on the bridge. Sparks fell from damaged systems, and she could hear human voices shouting damage reports. "Admiral," Chen said calmly, as if she wasn't commanding a dying ship in the middle of a ramming attack. "We've neutralized 3 of the bioships, but we're taking heavy casualties. My ship won't survive much longer." "Captain, you need to retreat immediately," Zixathera urged. "Your vessel is critically damaged." Chen's response was a sound that Zixathera had never heard before. The human was making sharp barking noises that showed her teeth. It took her a moment to realize that Captain Chen was laughing. "Admiral, humans don't retreat when we're winning." The screen went dark as the Indomitable disappeared inside the bioship's hull. For several minutes there was no word from the human vessel. Then massive explosions began erupting throughout the swarm dreadnought. The bioship's hull cracked and split as internal detonations tore it apart from within. "Incredible!" breathed the Ethereal Collective's representative over the fleet communications. "They're destroying it from the inside." But the cost was becoming clear. Through the gaps in the bioship's hull, Zixathera could see the Indomitable. The human vessel was barely recognizable. Its hull was breached in dozens of places, atmosphere and debris streaming into space. Entire sections had been torn away, and she could see human crew members floating among the wreckage. Yet the ship kept fighting. Its weapons continued to fire even as it died, sending railgun rounds and missiles into the swarm formation. Human fighters launched from the damaged hangar bays, their pilots flying damaged craft into suicide runs against the bioships. "Why don't they surrender?" asked the tactical officer. "Their ship is destroyed. Their crew is dying. What are they trying to prove?" Zixathera was beginning to understand something terrible about humans. They're not trying to prove anything. This is simply how they fight. She opened a channel to the entire Council fleet. "All ships assist the humans. Concentrate fire on the remaining swarm vessels." "Admiral," protested the Korthak fleet commander, "our weapons have been ineffective against them. Then we'll serve as a distraction while the humans finish them off." The Council fleet resumed its attack, and Zixathera was amazed to see the difference. The swarm bioships, which had seemed invincible an hour ago, were now vulnerable and confused. The human cyber viruses had damaged their collective consciousness, making them slow to adapt and coordinate. More importantly, they were afraid. Zixathera could see it in their movement patterns. The bioships that had fearlessly absorbed energy weapons were now trying to maintain distance from the human vessel. They had learned that humans were dangerous in ways they couldn't evolve to counter. "Ma'am, the Indomitable is hailing us again." Captain Chen reappeared on the screen. This time the damage to her ship was clearly visible behind her. The bridge was a ruin of sparking electronics and twisted metal. Several human crew members were clearly dead at their stations, but the survivors continued to work around their corpses. "Admiral, we've eliminated 6 of the bioships, but my vessel is no longer combat effective. We're going to attempt one final ramming attack on their flagship." "Captain, no," Zixathera protested. "You've done enough. Your crew needs medical attention." "My crew knew the risks when we signed up," Chen replied. "Besides, we've got them on the run now. This is no time to stop." Before Zixathera could respond, alarms began sounding throughout her ship. "Admiral," called the sensor operator. "The swarm flagship is changing course. It's retreating." On the tactical display, the massive bioship that had led the swarm attack was indeed pulling back. Its hull pulsed with frantic bioluminescence, and the smaller vessels around it were following suit. "They're running," whispered the tactical officer in disbelief. "The void swarm is actually retreating." Zixathera watched in amazement as the creatures that had terrorized the galaxy for months fled from a single dying human warship. The remaining bioships gathered around their flagship and began to withdraw toward the edge of the system. "Captain Chen," she called urgently, "the enemy is retreating. You don't need to sacrifice your ship." But the human captain's expression had changed. The pain and exhaustion were still there, but now there was something else. Something cold and predatory. Admiral, they attacked our galaxy. They killed our allies. They threatened our families back home. Chen's voice was quiet, but there was steel in it. Humans don't let that slide. The Indomitable, held together by little more than determination and emergency force fields, accelerated toward the fleeing swarm flagship. Its weapons had fallen silent, its engines were barely functional, but it still moved forward. "This is madness," the ethereal representative transmitted. "The battle is won. Why do they continue to attack?" Zixthara was beginning to understand. Because they're human. And humans don't just win battles. They make sure their enemies never come back. The collision between the Indomitable and the swarm flagship lit up the nebula like a new star. The human ship struck the biovessel's center of mass, and both ships disappeared in the expanding ball of nuclear fire. When the light faded, nothing remained but scattered debris and cooling plasma. The surviving swarm vessels fled into deep space, their collective consciousness shattered by their first encounter with human warfare. They would carry the memory of this battle in their genetic code, evolving new fears that they had never needed before. In the sudden silence that followed, the Council fleet hung motionless among the wreckage. They had just witnessed something that would haunt their dreams for years to come. A single ship, crewed by beings they had considered primitive, had done what their combined fleets could not. "Admiral," the communications officer said quietly, "we're receiving a transmission from Earth. They're asking for a status report on Captain Chen and her crew." Zixthara looked at the debris field where the Indomitable had made its final stand. Somewhere in that expanding cloud of metal and plasma were the remains of 300 human beings who had just changed the course of galactic history. "Tell them," she said slowly, "that their people died as heroes, and tell them that the galaxy will never forget what we witnessed here today." But even as she spoke, Zixthara knew that the real message was much more complex. The galaxy had just learned that humans were unlike any species they had ever encountered. They were warriors who fought with a ferocity that terrified even their allies. And now they knew that Earth existed. 3 weeks after the Battle of Kepler Nebula, the Galactic Council convened its first emergency session in over 200 years. Representatives from 12 different species gathered in the crystal halls of the Celestial Federation's capital world. They came to discuss a single question that none of them had expected to face: what to do about humanity. Admiral Zixthara stood before the assembled delegates, her long neck straight with military bearing. Behind her, a holographic display showed the wreckage of the swarm fleet. Twisted biohulls drifted in space like the corpses of ancient monsters. "Fellow beings," she began, "we have witnessed something unprecedented in galactic history. A species we classified as primitive has accomplished what our combined civilizations could not. They defeated the Void Swarm." Murmurs rippled through the assembly chamber. The Korthak war chief's scales flickered with aggressive colors. "They didn't just defeat the swarm, they terrified them into retreat. I've never seen anything like it." "Nor have any of us," agreed the ethereal collective speaker, her telepathic voice echoing in every mind present. "The humans fought with a ferocity that defies our understanding of civilized warfare." High Counselor Velthorin of the Celestial Federation rose from his crystalline throne. His ancient eyes had seen the rise and fall of empires, but even he seemed shaken by recent events. "The question before us is simple," he announced. "Do we embrace humanity as equals, or do we consider them a threat to galactic stability?" The debate that followed revealed deep divisions among the Council species. The Chitauri ambassador clicked his mandibles nervously as he spoke. "Their weapons technology is primitive but effective. They use kinetic projectiles and chemical explosives. These are technologies we abandoned thousands of years ago." "Perhaps we abandoned them too quickly," suggested the Aquatic Collective's representative through her water-filled speaking apparatus. "The humans have shown that simple solutions can be more effective than complex ones." But it was the Korthak war chief who raised the concern that haunted every mind in the chamber. "I've studied the battle recordings. The humans didn't just fight to win. They fought to destroy completely. They showed no mercy, took no prisoners, and accepted casualties that would break any civilized military force." Zixthara activated the holographic display, showing footage from the Indomitable's final moments. The assembled delegates watched in silence as the human ship rammed into the swarm flagship, destroying both vessels in a nuclear fireball. They sacrificed their entire crew to ensure the enemy's defeat, she explained. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to send a message. They wanted the swarm to know that attacking this galaxy would always be met with total retaliation. Barbaric, whispered the ethereal speaker. No civilized species engages in such destructive warfare. And yet it worked, Zixthera replied. The swarm fled to dark space and hasn't been seen since. Our intelligence suggests they're actually evolving new defensive traits specifically to counter human weapons. They're more afraid of us now than we ever were of them. High Counselor Velthorin raised his hand for silence. There is another matter we must discuss. 3 days ago, a human diplomatic vessel arrived at the edge of our space. They're requesting formal contact with the Galactic Council. This announcement sent shockwaves through the assembly. First contact with a new species was normally a carefully orchestrated process that took years of preparation. The humans were moving much faster than anyone expected. What do we know about this diplomatic vessel? Asked the Chitauri ambassador. Zixthera consulted her datapad. It's called the UES Endeavor. 2 kilometers long like their warship, but configured for peaceful contact. They're requesting permission to dock at Starbase Harmony for formal negotiations. Just one ship? The Korthak war chief sounded skeptical. They defeated the swarm with a single vessel, and now they're sending another single ship for diplomacy? Are they confident or just foolish? Both, I think, Zixthera replied. The humans seemed to approach everything with the same directness they showed in battle. The debate continued for hours. Some delegates argued for immediate integration, offering humanity membership in the Galactic Council and access to advanced technologies. Others pushed for caution, suggesting that humanity should be carefully studied before any formal contact was made. But a few voices spoke of something else entirely. The Shadowed Confederation's representative, speaking from behind a privacy screen, raised concerns that made everyone uncomfortable. We must consider the possibility that humanity represents a threat to our established order, the shadowy figure said. They have already demonstrated that our most advanced military technologies are inadequate against determined primitive warfare. What happens when they acquire our science and combine it with their aggressive nature? You're suggesting we should contain them? Asked High Counselor Velthorin. I'm suggesting we should be very careful about what we teach them. But it was too late for such concerns. Even as the Council debated, the UES Endeavor was approaching Starbase Harmony. Long-range sensors revealed that the human diplomatic vessel was indeed configured for peaceful contact. But it still carried enough weapons to level a small moon. Admiral Zixthera received permission to conduct the first formal meeting with the human diplomats. As she prepared to leave for Starbase Harmony, she reflected on how much the galaxy had changed in just 3 weeks. The Void Swarm, which had seemed like an unstoppable force of nature, was now hiding in the void between galaxies. The species that had ruled space for millennia were questioning their assumptions about warfare and technology. And somewhere in the outer rim, a small blue world called Earth was preparing to take its place among the stars. When the UES Endeavor docked at Starbase Harmony, Admiral Zixthera was waiting in the formal reception chamber. The airlock opened with a soft hiss and 3 humans emerged. The lead figure was a tall female with graying hair and eyes that had seen too much. Her clothing was simple but elegant, and she moved with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to command. Behind her walked 2 others, a younger male with the alert posture of a bodyguard, and an older female carrying what appeared to be communication equipment. Admiral Zixthera, the lead human said in perfect galactic standard, I am Ambassador Elena Vasquez representing the United Earth Systems. Thank you for agreeing to meet with us. Zixthera was struck by how normal the humans appeared. After witnessing their ferocity in battle, she had expected something more obviously dangerous. But these beings looked almost fragile compared to the armored Korthak or the massive Chitauri. Ambassador Vasquez, she replied formally, the Galactic Council is honored to make contact with your species. We have many questions about your people and your intentions. Ambassador Vasquez smiled, an expression that Zixthera was learning to recognize as a sign of human friendliness. I imagine you do. We're here to answer those questions and to discuss humanity's place in the galactic community. As they walked toward the conference room, Zixthera couldn't help but notice that the human bodyguard kept his hand near what was clearly a concealed weapon. Even in diplomacy, humans came prepared for war. Tell me, Ambassador, she said carefully, what does humanity want from the galaxy? The human woman considered the question seriously. Peace, trade, and the chance to explore the stars alongside other intelligent species. We're not looking for conquest or domination. And yet, your military capabilities suggest otherwise. Ambassador Vasquez stopped walking and looked directly at Zixthara. Her eyes held the same cold determination that Captain Chen had shown in her final transmission. Admiral, humanity has learned that peace is only possible when you're strong enough to enforce it. We hope to be friends with the galaxy, but we're prepared to be enemies if necessary. Zixthara realized that the galaxy was about to change in ways none of them could predict. Humanity had announced itself with violence, and now they were offering friendship. But beneath that offer was an unmistakable warning. The galaxy could accept humans as equals, or it could face them as enemies. Either way, the age of human isolation was over. The galaxy would never be the same.